They said a falcon was standing guard over a bobcat kitten, refusing to let anyone near. Maggie thought she'd seen everything, until she walked into Riverside Park and looked up into an old sycamore tree. It was impossible. Something no one could explain. Beneath the falcon's outstretched wings lay a small bobcat kitten. The bird was shielding the sleeping creature as if it were her own. Although the big bird accepted food from Maggie's hand, she refused to let humans touch the kitten. Then Maggie realized there wasn't just one kitten, but an entire litter hidden deep within the tree's hollows. A much larger tragedy and a desperate fight for survival was waiting to be discovered. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun climbed high over the rolling hills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting long golden rays through the ancient oak trees of Riverside Park. It was early May in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the air carried that particular sweetness of late spring. Honeysuckle and wild dogwood mingling with the earthy scent of last night's rain. The sky stretched overhead in an endless canvas of brilliant blue, unmarred by clouds, and the park sparkled with that crystalline clarity that only comes after a good cleansing storm. Margaret Maggie Sullivan had been a licensed wildlife rehabilitator for 37 years, and in all that time, she had never received a call quite like this one. "There's a falcon," the caller had said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "And she's sitting on top of a bobcat kitten. She won't let anyone near them." Maggie had loaded her rescue equipment into the bed of her weathered Ford pickup truck with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times before. At 63 years old, with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and crow's feet that deepened whenever she smiled, Maggie was known throughout the county as the woman you called when wildlife was in trouble. Her rescue center, Second Chance Wildlife Sanctuary, had saved countless animals over the decades, from orphaned white-tailed deer fawns to injured red-tailed hawks, from abandoned raccoon kits to rehabilitating black bears. But a falcon protecting bobcat kittens? That was something new. Her partner and fellow rehabilitator Tom Bradley met her at the park entrance. Tom was a retired veterinarian in his late 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hands that still possessed the gentle steadiness that had made him one of the most sought-after wildlife vets in the region. Together, they had built Second Chance from a small operation run out of Maggie's barn into a fully licensed rehabilitation center that had returned thousands of animals to the wild. "You're not going to believe this," Tom said as Maggie climbed out of her truck. "I've been watching from a distance." The caller wasn't exaggerating. "There's definitely a red-tailed hawk, not a falcon actually, and she's protecting what looks like at least one bobcat kitten in a cavity of that old sycamore by the picnic area." Maggie grabbed her heavy leather gloves and a soft transport carrier. "A hawk protecting a bobcat? That's impossible. Hawks eat small mammals. They'd see a bobcat kitten as prey, not a charge." "I know," Tom said, shaking his head slowly. "But seeing is believing, Maggie. Let's go." They made their way along the winding gravel path toward the heart of the park. The morning was already growing warm, and early visitors were beginning to arrive. Families with picnic baskets, joggers in colorful athletic wear, elderly couples walking hand in hand along the trails. It was the kind of beautiful Saturday that drew people outdoors, eager to shake off the last vestiges of a cold winter. The old sycamore tree stood like a sentinel at the edge of the main picnic area, its massive trunk mottled with patches of gray and cream, its branches spreading wide to cast a generous circle of shade. The tree had to be at least 200 years old, Maggie estimated, and its trunk was riddled with cavities and hollows, perfect shelter for all manner of wildlife. And there, nestled in a large cavity about 8 feet off the ground, was the most extraordinary sight Maggie had ever witnessed in nearly 4 decades of wildlife work. A mature red-tailed hawk, her russet tail feathers gleaming in the morning light, sat with her wings partially extended in a protective canopy. And tucked beneath that feathered shelter, sleeping as peacefully as if this were the most natural arrangement in the world, was a tiny bobcat kitten. Maggie felt her breath catch in her throat. The kitten couldn't have been more than 4 weeks old. Its spotted fur still fluffy with baby down, its oversized ears laid back in contentment. The hawk's wing curved over the kitten like a blanket, and the little wildcat's head rested on his paws, utterly at peace. "Well, I'll be," Maggie whispered. Tom set up their equipment quietly, speaking in low tones so as not to disturb the strange pair. "I've heard of cross-species adoption before," he said. "Usually it's domestic animals, dogs nursing kittens, cats adopting rabbits. But wild animals? A predator protecting what should be prey? This is unprecedented." A small crowd had begun to gather at a respectful distance, phones raised to capture the remarkable scene. Maggie paid them no mind. Her focus was entirely on the animals before her, and on the growing concern taking root in her chest. Where was the mother bobcat? Bobcat mothers were fiercely devoted to their young. They would never abandon kittens this young unless something had happened to them. And how had this kitten come to be in the hawk's care? The questions multiplied in Maggie's mind even as she approached the tree slowly, speaking in the soft, soothing tones she had perfected over years of working with frightened animals. "Easy now, beautiful girl," she murmured to the hawk. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just want to help." The hawk fixed Maggie with a piercing golden stare. These birds were not typically aggressive toward humans, but this one's body language was clear. She would protect the kitten at all costs. As Maggie came within arm's reach, the hawk spread her wings wider, her beak opening in a warning gesture. "She's not going to let us take him," Tom observed from behind Maggie. Maggie paused, considering their options. She had a small container of high-protein paste in her pocket, a nutritional supplement they often used to coax wary animals. Slowly, she withdrew it and squeezed a small amount onto her gloved fingertip, offering it to the hawk. The hawk regarded the treat suspiciously for a long moment, then tentatively accepted it, her sharp beak surprisingly gentle as she licked the paste from Maggie's finger. Encouraged, Maggie tried to offer some to the sleeping kitten, but the hawk immediately blocked her with a wing, positioning herself between the rescuers and her unlikely charge. "Remain beneath my wing," Maggie murmured, understanding the message. "I hear you, Mama. I hear you." It was then that Tom spotted movement higher in the tree. "Maggie, look up." Maggie followed his gaze, and her heart sank even as it soared with wonder. There, on a branch about 15 feet above them, sat a second bobcat kitten. "Oh Lord," Maggie breathed. "There's more than one." The second kitten was alert and watching them with the wide, curious eyes of youth. Unlike its sibling below, this one showed no fear, peering down at the humans with the innocent boldness of an animal too young to have learned caution. It was slightly larger than the first kitten, suggesting it might have gotten more of their mother's milk before whatever tragedy had befallen her. Tom was already preparing to climb. At 67, he was still spry and capable, and the sycamore's broad branches offered plenty of handholds. He scaled the lower portion of the trunk with careful deliberation, testing each foothold before committing his weight. The hawk watched him intently but made no move to interfere as he worked his way toward the second kitten. This one came to him willingly, mewing softly as Tom scooped it up in a soft cloth and tucked it securely against his chest. "Got him," he called down. "He feels healthy. Good weight, no visible injuries." Maggie nodded, but her attention had been drawn to something else. A slight movement in another cavity, this one partially hidden by a twist in the tree's bark. She moved around the trunk, positioning herself for a better view, and her breath caught again. A third kitten. Then, as her eyes adjusted to the shadows within the cavity, a fourth. "Tom," she called, her voice tight with emotion. "We've got a whole litter up here. At least 4, maybe more." The scope of the situation was becoming clear. Somewhere in the woods surrounding this park, a mother bobcat had met her end. To a car, perhaps, or a coyote, or simple illness. She had left behind her babies, too young to fend for themselves, too young to hunt, too young to survive without care. And somehow, impossibly, a red-tailed hawk had found them and decided that they were hers to protect. The third kitten was easy enough to retrieve. He was hiding in the cavity, trembling slightly, but he didn't resist when Maggie gently lifted him out. She held him against her chest, feeling the rapid flutter of his tiny heart, and whispered reassurances as she placed him in the soft-sided carrier. The fourth kitten was more challenging. He had wedged himself deep into a narrow cavity, and it took both Maggie and Tom working together. Tom supporting her as she leaned into the hollow to coax him out. This little one refused the nutritional paste, turning his head away with a stubborn set to his small jaw that reminded Maggie inexplicably of her late husband, Jim, who had passed 5 years ago. Jim had that same stubborn streak, that same determination that had driven him to build their rescue center even when everyone said it was a foolish dream. Once all 4 kittens were safely contained in carriers, there remained the matter of the hawk. She had watched the entire rescue operation with an air of alert vigilance, her head swiveling to track every movement, every sound. But she made no attempt to stop them once it became clear that the kittens were being handled gently. "We should take her too," Maggie said. "For observation. She's been under enormous stress, caring for babies that aren't her own. She might have injuries we can't see, or she might be malnourished from sharing her food with them." Tom nodded his agreement. Using a large, soft cloth, they were able to capture the hawk without harming her magnificent feathers. She submitted to the handling with surprising docility, as if she understood that her work here was done, that the babies she had protected would be safe now. As they made their way back to their vehicles, carriers in hand, a park worker approached them. He was an older gentleman, weathered from years of outdoor work, and his expression was troubled. "I saw the mama bobcat," he said. "Earlier this week, she was crossing Route 29, right at the edge of the park. I tried to slow traffic, but..." He shook his head, his voice trailing off. Maggie closed her eyes briefly. She had known, of course. There had been no other explanation for why 4 young kittens would be abandoned in a tree cavity. But hearing confirmation of the mother's fate still sent a pang through her heart. "The hawk must have found them shortly after," Tom said quietly. "Birds of prey are intelligent. She would have heard the kittens crying, investigated, and, well, something in her decided to help rather than harm." "It's a miracle," the park worker said, and Maggie could only nod in agreement. The drive back to Second Chance Wildlife Sanctuary took 40 minutes, and Maggie used the time to radio ahead to their team. The sanctuary sat on 20 acres of protected woodland in Albemarle County, a sprawling property that included quarantine facilities, rehabilitation enclosures of various sizes, a medical clinic, and the main house where Maggie had lived for the past 30 years. It had started as a small operation, funded by her schoolteacher's salary and Jim's work as a carpenter. But over the decades, it had grown into one of the most respected wildlife rehabilitation centers in Virginia. By the time they arrived, everything was ready. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the young veterinarian who had taken over Tom's practice when he retired, was waiting in the clinic with her equipment prepared. Jenny Walsh, the head caretaker, had prepared a warm, quiet space for the kittens, complete with heated blankets and a supply of specialized Bobcat kitten formula. The examinations revealed what Maggie had feared but expected. All 4 kittens were underweight, mildly dehydrated, and showing signs of the stress that came from losing their mother at such a young age. The smallest of the 4, a little female with distinctive white markings on her ears, was in the worst shape. Her body temperature was low, and she was too weak to even protest the examination. "This one needs immediate intervention," Sarah said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Tube feeding and warming. She might not make it through the night." Maggie nodded grimly. This was the hardest part of rescue work, the knowledge that sometimes, despite your best efforts, you arrived too late. She had lost animals before, more than she cared to count, and each loss carved a little piece from her heart. But she had also saved thousands, and that was what kept her going. "Do what you can," she said. "I'll stay with her tonight." The hawk, whom they had nicknamed Guardian, was examined separately. Remarkably, she was in excellent health. Whatever instinct had driven her to protect the Bobcat kittens, it hadn't come at the expense of her own well-being. She accepted food readily and seemed content in the spacious flight cage they had prepared for her. As night fell over the sanctuary, Maggie settled into the rocking chair in the nursery with the smallest kitten, whom she had begun calling Hope, tucked against her chest. The other 3 kittens were sleeping soundly in their heated enclosure, their bellies full of formula for the first time in days. But Hope needed more. She needed the constant warmth of another body, the steady beat of a heart to remind her that she wasn't alone in the world. Through the window, Maggie could see the stars beginning to emerge, scattered across the darkening sky like scattered diamonds. The mountains rose in silhouette against the last orange glow of sunset, and somewhere in the distance, an owl began its evening call. "Your mama loved you," Maggie whispered to the tiny kitten. "She would have done anything for you. And now we're going to do everything we can too." The days that followed were touch and go. Hope hovered at death's door for nearly a week, her small body fighting against the odds. Maggie barely left her side, catching sleep in snatches on the nursery cot, feeding the kitten every 2 hours around the clock. Tom and Jenny took over care of the other 3 kittens, who were thriving now that they had regular meals and warmth. On the 6th day, something miraculous happened. One of the sanctuary's resident foster animals, a gentle domestic cat named Rosemary who had helped raise countless orphaned creatures over her 8 years, was brought to the nursery. Rosemary was a champion mother. She had nursed baby squirrels, orphaned rabbits, even a pair of baby opossums. She seemed to possess an infinite capacity for maternal love that transcended species boundaries. When Jenny placed Hope near Rosemary, the orange tabby's reaction was immediate. She began to purr, a deep, resonant sound that filled the quiet nursery, and gently began to groom the Bobcat kitten's fur. Hope, for her part, seemed to recognize something in Rosemary's warmth and scent. She nuzzled closer, seeking the comfort that only a mother, biological or otherwise, could provide. By the next morning, Hope was nursing. Her temperature had stabilized. Her eyes, which had been dull with illness, were beginning to brighten. "She's going to make it," Sarah said, wonder coloring her voice. She's actually going to make it. Maggie felt tears sliding down her cheeks, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. After 37 years, she still hadn't learned to suppress the joy that came with moments like this. Spring turned to summer, and summer mellowed into fall. The 4 Bobcat kittens, Hope, Scout, Jasper, and Willow, grew from helpless babies into rambunctious juveniles. Their spotted coats filled out, their muscles developed, and their instincts sharpened. Under the sanctuary's careful guidance, they learned to hunt, first with toys and then with increasingly challenging live prey in controlled environments. They learned to climb, to stalk, to hide. They learned to be bobcats. Guardian the hawk recovered fully and was released back into the wild on a golden September morning. She circled the sanctuary 3 times before flying east toward the mountains, her russet tail catching the sunlight. Maggie liked to think she was saying goodbye. The bobcat kittens remained at the sanctuary through the winter, growing stronger and more independent with each passing day. By early spring, they were ready. The release site was a protected wilderness area in the heart of the George Washington National Forest. 50,000 acres of pristine habitat with abundant prey and few human intrusions. Wildlife officers had been tracking bobcat populations in the area for years and had confirmed that it was suitable territory for young bobcats starting out on their own. The morning of the release dawned cool and misty, the forest wrapped in a soft veil of fog that the rising sun was slowly burning away. Maggie, Tom, Jenny, and Sarah gathered at the edge of a meadow where 4 transport carriers sat in a row. Inside each carrier, a young bobcat waited, sensing that something important was about to happen. Maggie knelt before Hope's carrier first. The small female who had nearly died in her arms was now a sleek, powerful adolescent, her eyes bright with intelligence and wild spirit. Hope would never be fully wild. She had been too young when rescued, too dependent on human care. But she had developed the skills she needed to survive. "You've come so far," Maggie whispered. "Your mama would be so proud." One by one, they opened the carriers. Scout was the first to emerge, his ears swiveling to catch every sound of the forest. He took a few cautious steps into the tall grass, then bounded forward with the joy of an animal returning home. Jasper followed, then Willow, and finally Hope. For a long moment, Hope paused at the edge of the meadow, looking back at the humans who had saved her life. Maggie could have sworn she saw something like gratitude in those golden eyes. Then Hope turned and disappeared into the forest, following her siblings into the wilderness where she belonged. The sun broke through the last of the morning mist, flooding the meadow with warm golden light. Birdsong erupted from every direction, a symphony of welcome for the new residents of the forest. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called out, and Maggie smiled, wondering if it might be Guardian, watching over her charges one last time. Tom put his arm around Maggie's shoulders. "You did good, Maggie. You gave them a second chance." Maggie leaned into his embrace, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the deeper warmth of purpose fulfilled in her heart. This was why she did this work, not for the recognition or the gratitude, but for moments like this, moments when the broken were made whole, when the lost were found, when the impossible became possible. "That hawk saved them first," she said. "We just finished what she started." As they made their way back to the truck, Maggie paused to look back at the meadow one last time. The bobcats were gone now, vanished into the green embrace of the forest. But she knew they were out there, somewhere, living the lives they were meant to live. And in the end, wasn't that the greatest gift of all? 6 months later, a trail camera in the George Washington National Forest captured an image that would make its way to Maggie's desk. 4 young bobcats, healthy and strong, gathered at a stream in the golden light of a winter afternoon. And perched on a branch above them, watching with bright golden eyes, was a red-tailed hawk. Some bonds, it seemed, transcended all understanding.